for clicking on this video. In this track, we talk about events, and we're joined by Melissa Ashley, the Executive VP of Programs and Events at ICSC. We discuss questions like, why are events so meaningful? And what's the role of photography in making an event awesome? I love this episode, and I think you will too. So without further ado, enjoy the track. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Trek. The Trek is a Civics Unplugged series where community members participate in meaningful discussions on topics that are too often neglected when thinking about building the future. Through prompting questions and provocations, we venture together into complex but important conversations related to building the future and democracy. We understand that this work requires ongoing dialogue, but it's a journey worth trekking through. So my name is Ashley Lynn. I am 17 from Vancouver, Washington. And I am joined today by some of our amazing CU community members and a special guest who we'll get to hear from in a minute. Our topic today is events. And as always, we'll start off with the word association. So when you see your name on the screen, just feel free to share 1 to 3 words that you associate with the topic and why. And we'll start off with you, Jacob.
Okay, cool. Hey guys, my name is Jacob Crossman. I'm 17 and I'm from Long Island, New York. So when I see the word events, I think of events as like a unit of time, like it's a space where things happen. Kind of vague, but that's what I have for now.
All right, and I don't think Frey is here, so I can go ahead and go. I'm Madison. I'm a high school senior from Verdigris, Oklahoma, and my association would be highlight. I think that anytime that there is an event, like in the afternoon or the evening, it's something that I always look forward to during the day, and it always seems to be the highlight of my day.
Hey, I think your audio's messing up.
Is it my turn? Oh, I didn't know if Nyssa was.
No, her audio's messing up. You want to just type out what you're gonna, as you figure out your audio? Can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, awesome.
Okay, so hi, my name is Nyssa. I am a freshman in high school from Nashville, Tennessee. And the 2 words that I associate with events are festivals and phenomenons, because as I think about phenomenons, I think like the solar eclipse and COVID-19, and people are like, oh, it'll be like a lifetime for you, and it's like memorable. So yeah.
Very nice. So hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Ashley. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but suffice to say you can double and triple your ages and you still might not get there. So I live in New York, and I've been working for a long time in the events, trade show, and media industries. And when I think of events, I think of experience and I think of engagement. And if I'm brutally honest, I also think of old-fashioned, because I think events need a lot of innovation. I think it's a very old-fashioned experience, and I don't see a lot of the types of events that organizations I'm familiar with putting on appealing to your generation.
Yeah, on that note, so hey, I'm Gary. I'm normally in New York, but I'm calling in from my childhood home in Aurora, Illinois. Related to what Melissa just said, I think it's really important for event designers to create memories. So those are my words, create memories. Obviously not all events do a good job at that, but I think it should punctuate your life, right? It's like, oh, okay, I remember, it's like, oh, I remember that. That's like, you can look fondly on, oh, when we all came together and we had a great time. You know? Otherwise, kind of time just like is so blurry.
Yeah, cool. And when I think of events, I think of sports games and hallway conversations. And so sports games, because I was speaking with someone and they were kind of explaining to me how like when it comes to digital events, like it's like less so like like a Zoom and more so like a whole production. And like sports games are really like the perfect kind of like example of that because there's like people who can attend like in person, but then there's like also that same experience that's like shared online where like people like gather together and like watch it on TV. So like I don't know, but that was really interesting to me. And then hallway conversations because I those are my favorite parts of like in-person events and I just don't get to experience them online as much. Yeah, so we will move into the questions and provocation section of the track. So does anyone have anything they'd like to start us off with?
I actually do. So we're talking about how events should be memorable, especially that's something that event designers should have in mind. So my question is, what makes an event memorable and or worthwhile?
That is the question, right? How do you make an interaction or engagement or an activity worthwhile? And for me, I really need to first break it down to, are you talking about a consumer event, a business event? Is it a passion-based event like a sports game versus a business engagement? But that's always the million-dollar question is how do you make them memorable and worthwhile? What is it? And the only way to really answer that question in my mind is to really understand who the demographic is that you're trying to appeal to, right? Because you've got to go into that discovery mode to understand what's of value to them, because just bringing people together for the sake of bringing people together and putting a topic against it, even this discussion, is not very valuable unless there's a real takeaway that someone is angling.
To me, I think like an event being worthwhile and memorable like depends on like a specific moment in the event or certain things that are special. And it all kind of depends on what your role is in that event. Like for example, I have a friend who went to an LA Galaxy game. He had to walk out with some of the players, and like his role as a spectator that got upgraded to being a participant made a really poignant memory from going to that soccer game.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's like if you think about Instagram, I mean, Insta is just micro events, right? But they're so awesome that you want to brag about them, and that's we call it's brag worthy, right? That's just an amazing experience that you probably won't replicate. The average Joe, anyway. Madison, I know you asked the question. Did you have any thoughts also?
There's a reason why I asked it and didn't answer. I'd have to think about it. It's like you said, it's hard to answer because it depends on the type of event and the demographic, but I'd like to think that there's a through line, maybe even if it's just one. Yeah, not sure.
So I think that's a really interesting point, and I think there probably are some generalities, and the number one way to make an event memorable is to come up with those Insta-worthy moments, right? That people really feel like they had that special engagement interaction. Yet it's super challenging to be able to deliver that to every attendee. So I think the other one is, there's something I call event euphoria. When you go to an event, whether it's a business event or it's a consumer event, in the thick of it, if any of you guys have ever run a race before, when you're at that starting line and you're surrounded and you've got that energy and you've got that heat and, all of a sudden your nerves run away, go away and you're ready to go because you're feeding off the crowd. I feel like the same thing happens with events. The challenge becomes if you don't then have that memorable takeaway, that euphoria dissipates pretty quickly after an event. So there probably need to be 2 or 3 key actionable things that each individual can take away from an event so that they can then point back to the fact that because of that event, this happened, trying to get a little bit of that pseudo cause and effect.
Yeah, I mean, you actually just helped me think of something. I think it's pretty safe to say that an event would be memorable or worthwhile if someone was awarded a relevant new experience. So for instance, like I'm going to my first music festival in September and I've been like, just like the hype leading up to it, I've been really excited about it. And it's like, who knows if I'll actually like sitting there and listening to a bunch of artists that I don't even know, but it's like a new experience and it's relevant because I'll be going with some of my friends. And so I think that that would be a pretty common through line.
No, that actually makes me, that's actually a really good point, because when you first said you're going to a music festival, I'm thinking, oh God, this could go one of two ways. I mean, you guys heard of Fire Festival, either you're going to have such a high expectation that when you get there, you're just going to be, crushed, or they're going to really match it. And one of the other through lines for events really comes in the customer service side. You may not necessarily enjoy an event, but if you really feel like you were well taken care of, like it was somebody made the effort to make it worth your time or your money, that has a huge impact on what we call net promoter score, or how you then evaluate whether or not you'd recommend this event to somebody else in the future. So that's probably another through line we could think about.
Now, like it seems like there's like coordinated events that happen, like a big production or a big festival, and there's uncoordinated events. And I would ask, and I guess pose the provocation, like if you're someone that's organizing a coordinated event, like how does that change the way you would experience it, or even experience other coordinated events as a participant?
Well, I can tell you that I worked for the NBA for a number of years, and I still haven't gone to another game. Once you understand, I mean, it's understanding the secret sauce, right? All of a sudden, you know what you're looking for. If you've gone to Disney, right, and you go to Disney and you just have a great time, but if you really stood there and watched how they orchestrate everything, like as an event organizer, my daughter was out dancing the crowd, and I was busy watching how they were already rolling up and how they were doing everything, because you're just conditioned to sort of think like that. Doesn't mean you can't still enjoy it, but you're right. As someone that organizes events, then trying to sort of let loose and just be a participant can definitely be a little challenging.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like before COVID, I would help kind of host conferences with like just thousands of kids, and I just remember like waking up at 5 and like running around all day and rolling to bed at like midnight and like not being. I mean, like it's such a weird feeling where like every single detail that is going on, but at the same time like you don't know because you're not like actually part of it. It's like I don't know. And like something to think about a lot too is just I think like event organizing, like it requires so much like time and energy, and like I don't always think like event organizers and like facilitators are like compensated the right way. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah.
It does, because it requires a lot of precision, and it's a lot of hours. Right? It's a tremendous amount of hours. And I remember, managing teams where, the meeting planners, they're up first, right? They're the first ones up because they're the ones that are making sure breakfast is out and making sure the rooms are set. And the salespeople had been out really late, right, with all of their customers, so they don't need to be up at 5 a.m. And I remember one of the meeting planners just being so indignant, like if she was getting up at 5 a.m., why wasn't everybody else getting up at 5 a.m.? And frankly, she didn't make as much money as the salesperson, but she chose a different profession, right? But to your point, I do think that sometimes a lot of those meeting planners that really are the ones that are doing the grunt work are definitely underappreciated and probably undercompensated. But they tend to be considered cost centers, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said there. Like, it's really hard to like enjoy it. And for me personally, it's like very like overwhelming because like you have no idea like, oh, how many people are going to be there, and like what do you have to do to prepare this and all that other stuff. And I have done this like so many times, like with we've had like so many events at my old school, and literally my teachers would like give me like so many tasks to do, and I'm like, oh, this is so frustrating, like I don't even know what to do, like it's just so hard. And yeah.
It's a lot of work. Do you all organize events, all of you guys? Yeah. So
Yeah.
You do, because
Yeah,
I'd be
we
really
do.
interested, especially, because your generation, is not really all that fond of in-person events, right? And especially if it's from if it's a music festival, I think that's one thing, but if it's anything that has to do with education and business and what have you, it's really not a medium that you guys gravitate towards. So I wonder if there's anything unique that you guys do or look for in your events to be more appealing to that generation that has a very different mindset in terms of how they consume data, how they consume information, and also the amount of time they're willing to put against things.
Yeah, well, I will say that I guess I used to do in-person event organizing for school, but now I just do a ton of it for CU. And I think what we've found is what attracts young people is when they actually feel like meaningful participants. So we used to have a series at CU where we would invite what we call a civic superhero, someone who's done great work in the civic space, and invite them to talk. It was essentially just like a live interview. And I mean, the series just wasn't that great because the kids just felt like they were spectators and not participants. And so we have transformed all of our programming to where if you participate, you're going to have an impact on how the conversation in the event goes. And the Trek is a great model of that, right? Like, as we said in the beginning, like, we want concise points so that everyone can be an equal participant, you know? And so I think that's what really keeps people coming back to a lot of our programming at CU.
It's a great point.
And that's the thing, like coordinators have to kind of scaffold the experience for the participants. I think coordinators do a good job for Gen Zers when they really make sure that the participants get something to take away, like something that they can grow from in the experience. Like, for example, I used to always like frequent these Zoom calls where like I'd be a spectator and like they'd have all these like really great thinkers online, but I didn't really get to do anything. And so I kind of started moving more towards things where I could make a difference in what's happening in the conversation, which is why I like the Trek so much. It gives me like a chance to reach out and say something, and instead of just being somebody that sits on the sideline. So being a participant in a meaningful way, Madison, is like a great point.
Yeah, I like that point a lot. Are there new formats that you guys look at? In terms of, I mean, the Trek is one great format. It's small, everybody can engage, but are there other, especially when you're in person, are there other ways that you start to encourage dialogue?
I mean, we're completely digital first, and so I mean, my experience has all just been like Zoom, but we have a couple other formats that we use. Like, we have our Junto groups, which are small groups of like 6 to 8 of our fellows that meet every week, and they set goals together, and they literally just talk about whatever feels meaningful. Super open-ended. They can come and be like, I'm having this problem at school or my personal life, and they have just this group of people to bounce ideas off of. And then we have just like other series, like our Unmasterclass series, where someone will present some knowledge that they have learned for about 15 minutes. And then it's like an open discussion about what everyone learned from the conversation. So there's different variations of that. But I think that we've done a pretty good job of creating formats like that. But I don't know, I would love to hear if you all have experience with like in person as well.
I would say that like, one advantage of being online is that like the people I'm able to talk to online aren't necessarily people that I know from every single day. It's like, one, there's always new things to talk about. And like, two, I'm not obligated to talk about, what's in the immediate surroundings. I can talk about what feels important to me. So like when I think of people doing dialogue in person, I think of like summits and seminars. Those are kind of intimidating because they're all like professional and like everybody's got a suit on and everything. And so I think it's hard to encourage really productive dialogue in person.
Interesting.
So I do theater, and so like what was I gonna say? So like in my affinity group, I've taught like a few people like some theater skills like improv and some theater games, and we basically like to get to know each other more. We usually play those games, and it's a lot fun because like like who, like if you have the same personality as them, and like if you have the same interests as them, and it's actually really fun.
It's a great idea. It's a great icebreaker.
Yeah, that's great. Gotta take advantage of being in person. Hard to do theater games virtually.
Madison, is that a hint?
I have a question. So, what is the role of photography in making events awesome?
All right,
Yeah,
so I feel like you
no,
go, you
I
go.
think Nyssa was trying to speak, but I think she's muted.
All right, so to me, like photos and videos, even kind of like they make a moment more permanent. You're able to kind of revisit it and be like, oh yeah, that's what happened there. Like I was talking to that person. And so I feel like photos and other kinds of media taken from an event make it like that you can experience the event outside of the context of the event, which is why like podcasts are so cool because you're able to experience the conversation, what was happening without having to be there. And also they serve as like a record for, oh yeah, that happened, we'll do it again soon.
And to build off of something Melissa said earlier, in the age of Instagram, I think photography serves one word: FOMO. It's like
That's
I'm
right.
having more fun than you. Look at this great thing that I'm doing. This, how much fun I had. And it's just been so perpetuated by social media. I know that like for me, I like gotten this instinct where like on Snapchat I have a private story. So it's like anytime anything slightly funny or good happens, just the instinct is to whip out your camera and record it and post it. And I just think that that's so true.
It is so true. I mean, pre-COVID, when everything was live, that was every organizer trying to figure out is how do you get that, we call it earned media, right? How do you get people that are just snapping away and saying you should have been here, you missed it, because that's the best advertisement, right, for your brand or your event that there is. It is that referral. So FOMO is a great phrase. I also think photographs and photography set a tone, whether you're using them at the event or you're taking them at the event, but they definitely set a stage and set a tone that really helps just with that, internal feeling in terms of how you relate to the event and how you remember the event.
All right, so I'm not super versed in this, but I did live in California for a bit, so I kind of get it. Like at like any kind of big gala or big event for celebrities, they'll have like a red carpet. And like it's just a normal red carpet, but what makes it so special is that like everybody's getting their photo taken and they're going to be on the news for it and everything. So I feel like the presence of photographers and people interested in seeing what you're doing makes you as a participant feel way more special.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about photos a lot recently because I think it's just very different for us to talk about our community without like awesome photos that like make it seem like we have a really great community. I'm not sure. I don't want to share Zoom screenshots. So lame.
Yeah, they're ugly.
There's something just so beautiful about people like crowded together and like very happy and you know you all know what you did that weekend or a week or that's a big opportunity for us, I think.
Yeah, it leads back to the FOMO, right, as well. But it also gives legs. I mean, it's very easy to talk about something ethereally, but when you actually physically see it, it becomes real. It's like the old-fashioned, do you guys even know what this is? The old-fashioned business card. It's like, if someone told you what they did, that's great. But if they showed you a business card, it was like validating. It doesn't matter anymore. But that was sort of, back in the day, like that's how you validated who you were. And I think photos for all the things that are happening digitally and how people are engaging differently really help with that as well, making it more real.
I guess this is kind of two provocations in one, but like thinking back to when I was applying to Civics Unplugged, like we had those like cool little infographics, like the drawings of people hanging out and stuff. Like that's not like fellows, you know, with arms over shoulders and each other. So I was like wondering, you know, as a coordinator, as somebody in charge of, you know, Civics Unplugged and what it is, like, what is it like to try to make it look like awesome? Like it is, like it's hard to encapsulate what it is when you don't really have like a visual representation of it.
So I was in charge of most of the branding stuff, and yeah, you got to start abstract, right? You're like, okay, we're really forward thinking, futuristic vibes. We're not trying to make slight changes to our democracy. We want to take it to the next level, and we wanted to pick like a theme that really cuts across ideological lines. I think it's hard to you'll be hard pressed to find many people that don't think being an astronaut is badass, right? Well, like around the world too, not just America, around the world, and it's been kind of a lot of it was kind of lucky that oh wow, like the International Space Station was was like a really cool way for like Russian and American astronauts to like meet up and show world peace, right? And I think that metaphor just continues to be really useful for us. But again, I can't wait to actually be able to post like real people as well.
Yeah, I think another thing that's been really helpful for us is we had an event last summer called Commence 2030, where we honored people who were doing amazing service work during the pandemic. And so while it's hard for me to explain exactly what Civics Unplugged is to people, I can say, oh yeah, we had that event with Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Andrew Yang and Cory Booker. So we're able to meet people where they're at with other things they're familiar with, even though it may not be like in-person visual things.
Anyone have another question or provocation?
Yes, I have a question. So I want to know why are events so meaningful?
I guess that's an interesting question, why events are so meaningful. I guess it's a function of who they're meaningful to, but I think at the end of the day, we always fall back to the fact that, you know, we're all social creatures by nature. So that ability, I think, to connect over a shared topic, thought, soda, what have you, I think ultimately is what makes events so meaningful, that ability to congregate, right? And to have that right to congregate. That's sort of how I think about it, because I think most people that go to events are most excited as, I'm sorry, I can't remember, Madison, I think you were the one that said it, by who you meet in the hall, right? That serendipity of something or someone that you hadn't really anticipated, that you then get to communicate with. And that feeling of communication and connection, I think, is so important to our psyches. I think that's ultimately what makes events so meaningful in my mind.
Yeah,
Think about
totally.
too is I think like people buy into people buy into experiences that facilitate their transformation, and events are supposed to be transformative, right? Like when you're like in kind of this experience that's like super immersive, and like all your friends are super hyped about it, like it's almost something that like takes over you, and like it helps you kind of like step outside of like what is normal and like into this whole different space. And I think like that, like, like being able to like transform yourself in some meaningful way, is what makes it really exciting.
I love that. Sort of like you there's some events that transform a whole group of people together. That's like really cool.
Another thing I would say is I think that events are meaningful because, just like simply put, they're deviations from the norm. Like in a life where we have very, set routines most of the time, we're doing most of the same things every single day. Anytime that there's like a micro event that's different, it's pretty memorable. I remember in school, like it would be raining outside and all the kids would be looking out the window like, oh my gosh, it's raining, and the teachers are like, why are you like commenting that it's raining? It's like, well, because it's something different. And that just for some reason makes it meaningful.
Yeah, like to add on to that, like I think a lot of our time we spend in our lives is like preparation for things and like the empty time in between. But like our lives are punctuated by events. So like I remember like, training for 5 months during water polo season. But like I don't remember like any specific memories from that. But, like I'll always remember like our game against our rival high school. So I think like the events, like the crowning achievements that like result from the way we spend our lives.
Wow.
I love that
About
concept. Yeah.
yeah, especially like when like you spend like so long like preparing for an event, like that's like I don't know, like yeah, I guess it makes sense that like if you refer back to like a block of time and like everything was spent preparing for that one moment, then you would remember the moment and not necessarily like everything that went before it.
To me, it's like all about like making memories and like creating scrapbooks of the event. And it's like I always like to go back in my to my scrapbooks and be like, oh my gosh, I had such a fun time with this friend. This happened to this person. It's just really fun to look back at memories. And I feel like the most memorable event for me was my first birthday in India because I was a little baby and I don't really remember. And like my parents have like photo albums and like videos, and it's just so nice to look back at it.
Yeah, and obviously we've talked about this, and this kind of relates to the punctuated by events concept. But when you think about like you're like reminiscing with friends or even yourself, like do you think of I remember that indistinguishable practice time that looked the exact same as everything else, or do you talk about the championship game, or do you talk about like Coachella or a birthday, right? Yeah, I mean, I think we should all appreciate ordinary, you know, day to day, but that's just how our brains work.
Yeah, they're culminations, right?
Yeah, Gary, you bring up a great point. I'm realizing that, like, I think a lot of people probably experience this too, but a lot of my childhood friends, our friendship heavily relies on memories. Like, a lot of times, like, we just talk about what happened in the past and, like, oh, you remember when this happened, when this happened? So that's interesting to think about too.
I also think events are so meaningful because they're all about discovery, right? Regardless of if it's, something that you learn or someone that you meet or what have you, but it's a time to step outside and discover something new. I think that's something that, we thrive on.
It's just making me think about is just like the importance of having events as like markers in someone's life. I mean, I feel like I don't know, like at least like when COVID first started, I know lots of people were talking about like, oh, like how do we take these like experiences like prom or like graduation online? And like I think this is helping me like see like why that is so important because if someone doesn't like have something to look forward to, then like you're literally just like trudging through life. And you like won't remember anything. And so I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Ashley. I mean, think about vacations. I mean, we all get through school to get to vacation, get through work to get to vacation, and those are events. And they're points in time. And that's where your
Yeah.
best memories are formed.
Yeah. At the same time though, like I don't know, it just like doesn't quite sit right with me just because like it's like sad to like we like go to work or go to school every day and then like the only thing that we're excited for is like the next vacation, right? It's like how do we like is it even possible or desirable to mesh the two? Or like how do we
Yeah.
make our
Oh,
day-to-day lives more interesting?
definitely. And look, I think there's a lot of people like even look. There's a difference between there's a difference between like a family, everyone eating alone, and then getting together every night to eat. And there's also a difference between like not really engaging with each other when you're together for dinner, even if you do get together, and like actually making that like a thoughtful ritual, right? And so you can sort of have at least one event, probably multiple events if you're really thoughtful about it, that could be memorable, that could be, um, yeah, it could be meaningful.
Yeah, I guess I think if you, this may be a terrible analogy, but I mean, if you sort of take some of the politics out of it, it's a little bit what organized religion is about, right? It's that ritual. It's the cultural components, right, of coming together once in a while and with intention, as opposed to just as we always do. So I think there's something there, Gary.
I'll also add like that kind of provocation that Ashley brought up kind of reminds me of like all this kind of like nowness stuff that I see. We're like, oh, you gotta like appreciate what's happening right now. Can't be thinking about like, what's happening 5 days in the future. You need to focus on like right now. I think you really can appreciate what's happening in the moment. And I think sometimes people will just kind of go through their lives on autopilot until that big event happens. And I think it's important that we actually appreciate things outside of those big events as well.
I would agree, and I think that in the events industry, from a business perspective, where there's such a focus on digital and community, is maybe that live event is sort of an annual celebration or an annual culmination, but that there needs to be more opportunity to be able to engage consistently at will, right? And if you think about how consumers consume media these days, right? It's when they want, how they want, where they want. Yet when we then have events and think about how we consume information, it's still at these specific points in time. So thinking about how to use technology to sort of meld the two, I think is something we'll start to see more and more of in the future.
I think Mel kind of brought this up earlier and talking about Gen Z and events, but like, how do you guys think we could improve the way we host events digitally? Like, are there any like mediums, like maybe outside of the Trek, that you guys think are doing a really good job of involving people and bringing people together that are online and digital, but still like poignant as events?
I don't even know.
It's a really interesting question, Jacob, because I'll tell you that I think that at some point down the line, how you guys have built out your digital community and your digital events will become case studies for the future, because you've done something that most organizers struggle tremendously with, is it's become a very self-generating. Your community generates the majority of your content. So from the very beginning, your generation and the people that are involved have all led the direction and the discussion. And that's very, very challenging to generate. I mean, so it's whether by luck or design or a combination of the two, it's incredibly compelling, and something that a lot of us salivate over, frankly, is, how do you start to create that auto generated content from that community? So I guess the question would be, if it's the question of how to improve it, I don't know. I guess I might look to, how does technology help make things more relevant, connect different people in different parts of the country in different ways based upon common interests and shared interests? I mean, I guess that would be the next iteration. But it's a good question, because I think what you all are building is so strong to begin with.
Kind of answering my own prompt, like I feel like virtual meetings are like the best thing, because like you're able to talk with people that I would have never been able to interface with or even meet, back 10 years ago. And so I think the movement now is like making virtual things feel more like in-person real things. I sent a link to like this new Zoom
Oh, that's funny.
feature where like it literally makes it look like the people on the Zoom call like sitting at a table in front of you and you have a seat at that table as well. I think like, hey, maybe that is like the future. It'll be like, oh shoot, we're in virtual reality or whatever, seeing all of our friends around us. I don't know, like, will that be the same? It'll definitely be better, I think.
I think if the technology allows us to have a more, natural conversation, like that's part of the challenge is like everybody goes on mute, comes off mute, steps over each other talking. The table concept is compelling if you can all really see each other to understand, who's trying to speak next, right? Sometimes when you're on a really large Zoom, I mean, it's easy with this one, but how is technology going to help us behave more naturally? I think is an interesting question. Not necessarily replicate how we behave in person, but just behave more naturally.
So Leah is literally a Zoom shaped in a table. Interesting.
That's interesting.
Should we do reflection application?
Yes, that is a great idea. Let me drop the link to the notes in the chat so you can kind of look at it if you want to kind of just remember what we talked about. But yeah, anyone can kind of just jump in and share anything that you took away from this conversation. Yeah, or just things that surfaced for you.
I mean, I'll say for me, being in the events business for so long, it's really nice to hear that generations younger than me are still really interested in connecting and events and how to get together, because you just hear so much negative commentary, about people not wanting to go to events, better ways to connect, and not really appreciating the differences between how you can make a connection digitally versus really how you can make a connection in person. So for me, it's just really refreshing to hear that interest is still alive.
It's funny that you say that because I was early in the pandemic. I was like, maybe I'm just gonna connect with people less permanently, and this is so convenient, and you can just email me, Slack me, blah blah blah, and we can just efficiently do things. And a lot of times, so often when you're interacting with other people, it's not about the efficiency. It's about those memories. It's about connecting and experiencing things together and growing together, which is it's I think we're figuring out how to do that digitally, but we need the in-person part is just so irreplaceable.
Yeah,
I think it's good news because these events are in-person events are fun.
it can be.
I want to say like, now I've gotten older and like had to take on more responsibility and had more experience. Like I've realized how much effort it takes to have to like, coordinate an event for other people. You just kind of like appreciate what teachers do every single day, what coordinators do every single day. And it's like looking forward, it's going to be difficult to take the wheel, having to coordinate our own events in the future too. And so although I'm a bit concerned that I'm not going to be the best at it at first, I think it's cool that there's so many mediums now that will allow us to get better at coordinating and getting things together in the future.
For me, it was really interesting to hear everyone's opinions on like events. And like, this was kind of an interesting conversation for me. And I'm kind of happy that everybody like wants to like have in-person events and like how Melissa was saying, like connect online. And I kind of like that, and it makes me feel very happy personally.
Yeah, and I will say that I think this trek has really helped me just gain a greater appreciation for events. I It's weird because when I was reflecting on this before, like I was trying to come up with a word association, and one of the words I thought of was like signaling, because to me, like events often like I don't know, also just have like I don't know, it's like I thought they were used for like signaling purposes and like to be like, oh, this is like the culminating event, and like it's just like something that we have to go through to like show everybody who like sponsored us that like we accomplished things. But this is helping me realize that like it goes so much deeper, and there are, a lot more human applications of it as well. So yeah, this is really, really, um, really an interesting conversation. So thank you all so much just for being a part of it. Melissa, I know this was your first track, so I would love to hear just what you thought about the event format, or just how dialogue went.
I think the event format's great. It's not often you get to just have unscripted conversation, and to be able to have unscripted conversation with people that you don't really know. I mean, Gary, I met you. I really enjoyed. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah,
It's a pleasure.
this was
Nice
really
to
great.
meet you.
Yeah, awesome.
All right,
Thank you
thanks,
so much, everyone.
Have a great
Thanks,
evening.
everybody. Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everybody. See y'all soon.